Good evening and welcome to the Finance and Operations Committee in-person and virtual meeting for August 23rd, 2022. I hope everyone's having a pleasant evening. Before we call tonight's meeting to order, Dr. McGarry, will you please outline the public participation procedures, sir?
Thank you, Board President Brown. Hello, everyone. And just also like to acknowledge today was our first day with all of our staff back, so we're a little tired, but congratulations. So the board provides an opportunity during committee meetings for participation in person and virtually. Those who are in person at the time of public comment and question after the board has conversations on each item and has opened it up to the public in person for them to come to the microphone, provide their name and address, and to comment or question a particular item on either report. As Board President Brown said, there are 2 reports for this evening, and you can ask questions and get into a back and forth based on boards answering questions or asking it to the administration. So those who are in person can go first. They can provide their name, address, and the specific report they'd like to comment on before the board makes any decisions moving forward. Those who are virtual have 2 options. They can provide either an email comment at board meeting questions at upwardrbsd.org or at 610-789-7200 extension 2000. If you're either emailing or phoning in a comment, it's please provide your name and address and the specific report you'd like to comment on. Again, the board will take that into consideration, and if board members want to answer the question before turning it over to the administration, obviously that is the process. And we'll provide updates as we go.
Thank you. The meeting of the Finance and Operations will please come to order. Roll call, Board Secretary, Mr. Rogers, please.
Dr. Haig.
Present.
Mr. Desnoyers.
Present.
Mr. War Savage. Mr. Neal.
Present.
Ms. Lamar Murphy.
Present.
Ms. Williams.
Present.
Mrs. Mitchell.
I'm present and I can hear the proceedings.
Mr. Fields.
Present.
Mr. Brown.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to offer?
There are no amendments.
Thank you. The agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying I oppose and state your name for the record. Those abstaining, please signify by saying I abstain and state your name for the record. The motion carried. Mr. Rogers, will you please begin with an overview of your agenda items for this evening, sir?
Sure. Tonight we have 2 agenda items. The first is the 2022 bond issuance update, which is informational. I'm just going to review the actual bond that we issued, which is an update to our previous presentation on going through the process. The bond has been issued at this point, so now's the time to update on the actual information that we received through issuing the bond. And again, that's informational. The second would be policies, which are board action. Policy 606, tax collection, and Policy 913, non-school organizations, groups, and individuals.
Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
Do you want me to jump right in?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So as I said, the first presentation is the 2022 bond issuance update, and again, it's informational. So we'll run through the issuance timing, the positive impact of the bond on the district, and also the actual capital improvements that are set to be done through the bond financing. So as far as bond issuance timing, this is just a review of the past few months of how we got to where we are and actually issued the bond. So on June 7th, the board approved the max parameters resolution. On the 21st, I was interviewed by Moody's Investor Services to go through the actual credit opinion. The Moody's issued a credit opinion on June 24th. We then went to July 14th, where we actually locked in the interest rate and the pricing. The settlement of the actual bond was a few weeks ago, August 9th, which was actually settling on the bond. So if you think of it and kind of equate it to purchasing a home, I know I've done this in the past with different topics, but if you were going out for a loan, you're going to lock in your interest rate at some point and then eventually settle in the future. So that's that difference between locking the price on July 14th and then actually going to settlement, transfer of funds on August 9th. So as far as the positive impact, and we'll get into interest rate charts to kind of give a visual for the board and the public, the actual interest rate yield was just about 4.2%. This is higher than our previous bond issuance, which was issued at a historical low. At 4.2% on a 30-year bond, we're still below the average interest rate over the past 30 years. So we're still in a good position as far as interest rates go historically. Not as great of a position as we experienced last year, but obviously everyone's experiencing the economic changes and impact that we've experienced throughout the world. So the other piece of it, the financial savings, we had a big conversation in our previous presentation of a general obligation bond versus a standard general obligation bond versus a bank qualified. And we described, under 10 million, gave you bank qualified. Historically, it used to give you 25 basis points or 0.25% advantage on the interest rate. In the way the market is right now, they really predict more of maybe a basis point or two, somewhere in the, they're predicting like a 0.1% advantage on pricing the bond, just because the market's been a little bit, different with the volatility that's been going on lately. The bigger piece to it is, and I had explained this before, the call feature, meaning when can you refinance? So on a regular bond, that's 8 years. For a bank qualified, it drops down to 5. So 5 years out from now, all things considered equal, if the interest rates are better, we could use the call option and take advantage of a lower interest rate 3 years earlier than you could have if you went out with a standard bond. With the way that we've been going through our bond financing and building it into the budget, we've been lucky enough to be able to creatively build it into the budget each year, bringing on the extra cost while also bringing a minimal impact to the budget from year to year. So, part of that has to do with capitalized interest and different creative ways that our financial team has worked through it. So that's actually the next bullet line there. You'll see that the bond was actually 9.95 million. The actual funding cash that came into the bank account for capital improvements is 8.9 million, and that number is net of capitalized interest and the issuance costs. So you take a portion of the bond and actually capitalize the interest, and that helps make your first few payments of the bond, so flattening out the immediate impact to the budgets, and then be able to feather that into our budgets over the next few years. And we've done that with the past 2 issuance, and it's been very advantageous to how we've been able to build our budgets. Case in point, part of the tax increase this year, about 0.5% of the 1% increase was allocated to help build up our bond base for the future budgets. So this is just a quick interest chart, and obviously it's very small. I will point out, and there's a note on the side, this is a 10-year chart, meaning if you're issuing a bond with a life expectancy of 10 years, payoff at 10 years versus the 30 years that we put into this current bond. So it's more of a visual representation of where have the rates gone, over the past 30 years. So you can actually see that on the lower end, you see the black line. That's actually where that was our rate lock. And that's actually to the point of being below that 30-year average. So if you look at the graph across the top, about the midway point there is where the 30-year average would be. So it's slightly at the top of the red box on that graph on the top. And you can see that when you drop down, we issued below that. We were actually on a down, the rates were dropping down. There was a point where I think it was a little, the timing was tough when we came out to present about moving forward with the bond. There was going to be an announcement from the feds for interest rate hikes, and it became questionable about where the rate's going to go. And we did see right before the presentation a big spike in the rates, and luckily they did come back down by the time we had our rate lock in July. So again, that's still, historically, we are below the 30-year average at 4.2%, which we're happy with considering where the market's been at and how much it's fluctuated. So to jump into the actual capital improvements, so this will be used to help close out the Aronimink renovation and addition, be able to get into the more pre-construction design work to get Clifton Heights Middle School off the ground, exploration and design of a potential new elementary school, depending on, we're going through the facility study right now. We're working on where the best location may be and bouncing our financial ability and what is the most fiscally responsible path forward. So we're very interested to see where that report takes us. And then the final piece there, we list as potential toilet renovations. And we don't have a school identified at this point because we're going through a facility study and we want to see what are the actual needs from the professionals who are actually producing that study. So there is a little note at the bottom that all projects are subject to change depending on the needs and availability of funds. I will say that, those first three are absolutely, we're underway working on. We're not at the pre-construction design phase for new elementary school. We're still exploring, I know the public and the board knows that we have publicly spoken about the different sites across the district and where we have had ideas to potentially build schools and also the challenges with each site. So we're bouncing that and we're very much looking forward to the facility study report coming out. And that's really all I have for the bond update, but if the board has any questions.
I do have one question. I'll start off and then I'll look to my colleagues to see if they have any questions. The interest yield, rate yield, 4.2%, that was, like the best we can get as you explained, and that wasn't quite as good as last year. What was, the exact rate that was last year?
So we were between 1% and 2% last
okay.
year. It was like
But
the
that was an anomaly
sub ones. Yes, that was absolutely, when you look at, so if you look at the chart, when we issued, we were in this low point. And that's a 30-year chart, so I'm kind of circling a bigger area because
Right.
I'm not going to pinpoint it exactly, so we were back further down the line.
Right.
And we, that was a major advantage of the timing of the bond and how things worked out. There's no exact science to it. Nobody can predict these things. Quite frankly, we got lucky.
Real lucky.
And, we did our best to try and time it with some predictions with our financial advisors. But, 4.2 over 30 years, is actually a good rate. So we're happy to see that versus some of the rates may continue to climb. It'll be interesting to see where the market goes, but.
And as you told us, in 5 years, it could be even better, right? Possibly.
Could be better, it could be worse. This may be a steal in 6 months.
It's worse, we just stay with what we have, right?
Yes.
Right.
I think the most important part of that statement is, as bank qualified, you could call in 5 years. So in 5 years, the rates may be worse, but in 6 or 7, they may be better, or vice versa.
Right.
But it gives you that option to still be prepared to navigate the interest rate market.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Thank you, President Brown. Mr. Rogers, do we have any bonds that are coming up and expiring where we'll have additional monies in the budget where we could, get another bond for more money for additional projects, or is that we have nothing coming up due?
So and I'm trying to pull up the document so we do have bonds coming where you're saying due. They're going to expire. We'll pay them off. What we've done in building our bond budget, essentially, in conjunction with actual capital improvements, it's called lapping, meaning your older bonds are paid off, and when that older bond gets paid off, instead of your budget just dropping, the newer bonds payment jumps up. So where you may have in the beginning stages, like a good example would be our 2019 issuance. Up until June of 2026, our payments are under $200,000 a year. And then we have a lapping there where the 2010 bond and the 2011 actually drop off. We pay them off. That same payment for 2019, that issuance, goes from $200,000 to 1.5. But because you're dropping off the other costs, you now lapped in the other one. So when they design the payment schedules for those bonds as we've issued them, 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 2 and 21 and 22, it was built that way so that we don't experience a major jump. There are slightly bigger jumps at times, but that's where I say when we go through the minimal impact of the budget, we've been building in and building up that bond budget. So we do have two in the next 2 years that are going to be paid off, one of which was a refi that we did last year. That was one of the issuances in '21. And then 2010 and 11 issuances are closing out in 2026. So, but that has all been built into our plan to try and mitigate the annual impact to the budget.
I just have one quick thing, which is, first of all, last year it was a much larger amount, wasn't it? Or no? Was
Yes.
it- Yeah, so we really did take advantage of those low rates, which is great. And then, I mean, it's hard not to ask what schools are likely candidates, having seen the Westbrook Park bathrooms, but I know we're not alone. I know so many of the schools are in equally terrible shape, but it's hard to resist the temptation to ask.
So it's a little more complicated than just which
you can't
school is
answer-
in the most need. They all are. All of our schools are in need of capital improvements, every single one of them. Forget about just toilet renovations. I mean, you can go down the most simplistic needs in our buildings. Every one of them is in major need of help. We've been lucky enough, the board has supported us to be able to work on the renovations of the bathrooms at the secondary level. Both middle schools at the start of this school year will be complete, with the caveat if there's one lone bathroom or two at Beverly Hills that have to be, they're little punch list items. And the high school only had one wing done. So, when we go back to the elementary schools, a lot of our buildings actually have individual bathrooms in each building. When you go to renovate any bathroom, or any project for that matter, immediately you have to look at ADA requirements, because when these buildings were built, ADA requirements weren't exactly, the
Didn't
same,
exist.
if not existing at all. So that complicates specifically many of our elementary school bathroom projects, because they are not ADA. Once you start the work, you're talking about, we have internal plans I don't want to get into right now, as Dan has pulled the microphone closer to himself. It's a much bigger picture. We've definitely identified a few that we would like to go to, but quite frankly, depending on, cost of construction and things, we're making sure we have enough money to close out the major projects we have. And what's left over, that's where we'll look at what can we pull off.
Yeah, just to come back to that, I won't go into all the internal details of the back and forth of these projects, but all the elementary schools, especially schools that have bathrooms in the classrooms. Some of the elementary schools have bathrooms in the classrooms, and when you start to touch those bathrooms, that becomes a major concern and issue. The other part for us that at some point in time, not tonight, that we're going to have to work through is the amount of use that our schools get, like all the way up until the first week of August or the second week, or actually up until like a week or two ago, makes it extremely difficult to turn around these projects, to get in there, clean the schools, and get them ready. So we're up against that. And that'll be a conversation coming up soon, coming out of the school year. Running all the schools, using all the space, and trying to get these projects done has been very difficult lately. So that's another conversation we're going to have about the use of the facilities, turning around, getting them clean for school, and then doing these projects is kind of running in tandem at times, and it's competing. We want to make these schools as good as we can. And you're right, Dr. Egg, the bathrooms at Westbrook Park are in need of work. The bathrooms at Highland Park, Hillcrest, so.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? You can go on to your next agenda item, please. Thank you for that informative presentation.
Thank you. So at this time, we have the policy conversation, and I will hand that over to Mr. Desnoyers.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. So there are two policies under consideration during this meeting. They are Policy 606, Tax Collection, and Policy 913, Non-School Organizations, Groups, and Individuals. As a reminder, these changes must undergo a second reading at a future board meeting prior to taking effect. This evening, I will provide brief descriptions of the updates to these policies. More complete information about the updates to these policies can be found in the Finance and Operations Summary of Policy Changes document, which is posted to Board Docs. The updates are as follows. Policy 606 is being updated due to an amendment to the local tax collection law, which is a PA law, that reinforces the general rule for when a property owner in the district does not receive a school tax bill. But the update carves out a limited exception for different treatment. In particular, there is now a very narrow path for first-year owners to request a waiver of penalties, interest, and other fees while being ineligible for discounts. For property owners that do not meet all the criteria to be first-year owners, the change reinforces that school taxes are due whether or not the property owner receives a school tax bill. This change will not become effective until the 23-24 school year, that is, for tax bills mailed in July 2023. As far as Policy 913, earlier this year, PSBA issued a revised model policy for Policy 220, Student Expression Dissemination of Materials. These changes to Policy 220 were approved by the Board at the August 9th Board meeting. PSBA has now issued similar updates for Policy 913, non-school organizations, groups, and individuals. And Policy 913 addresses materials and activities of non-school organizations, groups, and individuals, and for consistency, the same terms, distribution and posting, were changed to dissemination. There are also additional updates to Policy 913 and to the corresponding ARs. That concludes my discussion. I should ask if there are any questions.
Seeing none, no questions in the room. Any questions online, virtually?
There are no comments or
No, I'm
questions.
good, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Did you need that information from me, or was that for Rachel?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I think that completes agenda item number 2. You want to summarize, Mr. Rogers, please?
Sure. So again, we had 2 items tonight. The first was the 2022 bond issuance update, where we discussed the actual results of our bond issuance on August 9th. And that's informational. The second, policies, board action, Policy 606, tax collection, and 913, non-school organization, groups, and individuals.
Thank you. So the first one's informational. The second one, you want concurrence to move that forward, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are we okay with moving that one forward? The policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. We have consensus to move that forward. At this time, are there any public comments?
There are no public comments at this time.
Okay. Anyone in the room? No public comments? Okay. So you already reviewed. A motion is in order for the adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.